The Porsche Panamera e-hybrid, sleek and almost silent, glided to a halt before the massive wrought iron gates. The late afternoon sun over Los Angeles, having cooled from a burning copper to a rich, golden bronze, had just slipped below the ridge, leaving the sky a deep violet. Michael B. Jordan felt a rare, almost physical sigh of relief. A month of filming Creed 4 was over. This was his trophy, his quiet, private sanctuary, the Azure Crest villa in Malibu, rented for 2 weeks. He tapped the button on the car's touch screen, punching in the 6-digit access code sent by the agency. The engine idled, waiting. Instead of the expected mechanical grinding of the gate swinging open, there was only a weak, unsatisfying metallic click. "Not my day," he muttered, stepping out of the car. The air here, high on the hillside, was clean, salty, and smelled surprisingly of blooming jasmine. Michael walked to the pedestrian gate and tried the code again. Nothing. It was only then that he noticed the light in the living room, soft, warm, diffused. But the windows were not empty. Silhouettes were moving behind the designer furniture. Someone was home. Michael felt a wash of cold sweat trickle down his back despite the warm, heavy evening air. It wasn't surprise. It was an unpleasant, familiar intuition. Something was wrong. He pressed the call button, and his voice, honed by years of delivering precise dialogue, sounded calm yet firm. "This is Michael Jordan. I've rented the property. Please open the gates." A moment later, the grand, carved front door, which should have been his entrance, swung open. A man stood in the doorway. White, solidly built, around 50, dressed in an expensive but casual linen shirt, with a glass of something golden in his hand. His face was relaxed and tanned, but the gaze he swept over Michael, from his sneakers to his chin, and then to the Porsche, was icy and, above all, contemptuous. "Can I help you, pal?" the man asked, and the word, pal, landed like a contrived joke. The glass in his hand swayed slightly. Michael felt the muscles in his neck tighten instinctively. A hot internal voice screamed, "Don't respond with aggression. Be calm. You are a star, not a thug. You have every right to be here." "I am Michael Jordan. I rented this villa for the next 2 weeks through Luxury Stays Agency. According to my contract, it should have been vacant today at 6, he stated, holding out his phone with the booking confirmation. The man didn't even glance at the screen. He took a sip. His lips curled into a slow, disdainful smirk. "That's truly hilarious. But I'm afraid you have the wrong house. Or perhaps you've mixed up your assignment. I'm Robert Kaufman, and I am the sole person who rented Azure Crest. He leaned against the doorframe. "I'm not expecting food delivery, and the staff usually uses the service entrance. What is it you truly need?" Michael felt his pulse begin to hammer in his temples. Every sound, every whisper from the living room behind Kaufman transformed into a loud, irritating drumbeat. This wasn't an agency mistake. This was a challenge. This was a humiliation he felt tactily, like the pressure change in the air before a storm. Kaufman was looking at him like a stain on an expensive rug. "I am the actor Michael B. Jordan, and I rented this house," Michael repeated, his voice dropping a register, dangerous and low. Robert Kaufman let out a slow, deliberate laugh. From inside, a woman, his wife, Eleanor, approached, looking at Michael with an expression of feigned surprise. "Oh, Robert, is that really him? Is he one of those pranksters?" Her voice was thin, laced with unmistakable sarcasm. Michael, standing in the doorway as if on a psychological front line, let their words wash over him. He was used to it. His life was a paradox. He was a god on screen, a multimillionaire, an emblem of masculinity, yet in the real world, when a black man occupies a space implicitly reserved for whiteness, he remains suspicious. Michael's internal monologue, the paradox of power. I just earned $25 million on a film. I legally paid for 2 weeks in this place what they'd likely earn in half a year. And I still have to prove my right to exist, to rest, to simply be. Like Adonis Creed, I'm fighting ghosts. Like Killmonger, I feel the rage, but I must not show it. He recalled the short, dynamic call with Jenna, his agent, an hour before his arrival. Dialogue 1, the warning. Jenna: Michael, the villa is incredible, you deserve it. But be careful. The neighbors there are old money, a very, very closed circle. If there's any issue with the code or anything, do not engage. Call me, and I'll handle it through legal. Michael: Got it, Jenna. I'm not looking for trouble. Just quiet. She sighed a knowing, cautionary sigh. You're looking for quiet in Malibu, being who you are, Michael. Sometimes that's the same thing. Jenna's words felt prophetic now. He clenched his jaw. Robert Kaufman waved his hand dismissively at Michael, as if shooing a fly. Look, pal, I don't care who you are on television. I rented this place. I have guests inside. This is private property. I have no intention of spending my evening dealing with your acting antics. Eleanor, scrutinizing Michael, added, Maybe it's your manager's mistake? Perhaps you should have rented something less ambitious? Her voice, though soft, cut deeper than glass. Internal monologue, ambitious. Ambitious. They view my mere presence here as an ambition, not a right. It's not about the villa. It's about me challenging their hierarchy just by standing here, keys in hand. Michael suddenly felt a wave of nausea from the smell of expensive liquor and coffee wafting from the open doorway. It was the scent of their confidence, their unquestioned privilege. Michael finally raised a hand to cut off their dialogue, which they were conducting as if he were invisible. Dialogue 2, stating the case. Michael: Mr. Kaufman, I am not asking you to believe me. I am only asking you to call Luxury Stays or check your email. I have sent them the contract and receipt. Please do so before the police arrive. Robert: The police? Are you threatening me? Michael: I am not threatening. I am stating a fact. If you fail to vacate the premises I legally rented, we will be forced to resolve this through law enforcement. He spoke calmly, but with such gravity that Robert paused momentarily. Robert's face flushed red, but he quickly recovered his composure. In this power game, he couldn't afford to let his emotions show weakness. Do you know who my lawyer is, kid? Robert sneered. Feeling his position legally vulnerable, Robert Kaufman quickly transitioned to a blatant display of power. He pulled out his phone and, deliberately holding Michael's gaze, slowly and loudly dictated the address to 911. Yes, I need a patrol to Azure Crest, Malibu. I have an unidentified individual refusing to leave the property. He's threatening me. Yes, a large, black man. Looks like, well, you understand. Yes, I'll forward a copy of my passport and rental agreement now. Those words, unidentified individual, large, black man, struck Michael like a series of sharp jabs. They were aimed not at legality, but at fear. Kaufman was weaponizing Michael's race, his physical appearance, to incite an aggressive, potentially dangerous response from law enforcement. Psychological struggle, restraint, rage, pure hot rage. I want to shove him, to make him shut up. I want to scream, I am Michael B. Jordan, and I am worth more than you will ever be. But I know, one scream, one wrong move, and his narrative becomes the truth. I become the aggressive black man. Eleanor dramatically stepped away from the door and pulled shut a heavy velvet curtain on the living room window, as if Michael were something contagious that she didn't want her guests to witness. Michael felt a slight tremor in his left hand. He lowered it into his pocket, squeezing his keys. The scent of jasmine suddenly turned acrid, mixing with something medical, like disinfectant, the clean, artificial scent of fear. He took a step back toward his car, a tactical retreat, not a surrender. He activated his phone camera, ensuring the recording clearly showed Robert's face, the license plate of his parked car, and the house's facade. This was his silent reply. Robert, seeing the camera, yelped in frustration. "You have no right to film me, and you have no right to deny me my lawful shelter." Michael replied calmly, continuing to film. His voice was quiet, like autumn rain, but every word felt as heavy as stone. At that moment, a third character emerged from the villa, a young man, perhaps Robert's son, Jake. He wore a university sweatshirt, headphones around his neck, and looked acutely uncomfortable. Dialogue 3. Nuance. Jake, quietly to Robert. "Dad, what's going on? Don't you know who that is?" Robert, sharply cutting him off. "Jake, go back inside. This is not your business. It's just a misunderstanding with a delivery. I'm handling it." Michael, addressing Jake, ignoring Robert. "I'm not a delivery. I'm your neighbor, or was supposed to be. Your father just refuses to believe it." Jake looked from Michael to Robert, swallowed the words he was about to say, and retreated quickly. His eyes showed shame, but he chose silence and the shadows, a classic choice for someone afraid to challenge authority within their own family. Michael felt the pressure intensifying. He was isolated, and all the advantages of white privilege were being deployed against him. Authority, assumption, the police. 15 minutes later, the patrol arrived. 2 officers, young but already with tired eyes, saw the Porsche, the villa, and 2 men, the white one speaking with annoyed superiority, and the black one standing quietly, holding a phone. Robert Kaufman stepped forward, immediately launching into a fast, loud account of his version, giving Michael no chance to interrupt. He expertly used the triggers: self-defense, threat, suspicious booking. Michael let him speak. He knew that right now, his dignity would be measured by his restraint. When Robert finished, Michael walked up to the senior officer. He didn't raise his voice. His demeanor was impeccable and professional. "Officer, please allow me to speak. My rental agreement, receipt for full payment, and my identification confirming I am the person named in the contract are on this phone. Please verify this. Also, I ask you to note that Mr. Kaufman summoned you by using my racial identity and physical size as a tool of intimidation, not simply as a description. This is on video record." The officers reluctantly checked the documents. They saw the evidence. Michael's contract was valid, his payment was the first made, and Robert's booking was strange, possibly fraudulent. The senior officer, sensing an unpleasant bureaucratic situation, chose the path of least resistance, the path that favors the established order. "Mr. Jordan," he began, avoiding Michael's gaze, "we see you have valid documents. However, since Mr. Kaufman and his family are already inside the premises and claim to be lawful tenants, we cannot evict them without a court order. To prevent further escalation, we recommend you leave the area and resolve this through civil court tomorrow morning." A recommendation? Essentially an order. Again, his right was postponed because his presence was deemed an escalation. In that moment, an internal shift occurred in Michael. He didn't feel rage. He felt a clear, crystalline determination. This wasn't just a rental dispute. This was a demonstration of how the system uses procedure to always protect privilege. The decision: I won't yell. I won't fight. I won't burn the bridge. I will go higher. I will use my greatest weapon, my voice and my platform. If they don't want me here, I will make sure they can't ignore me. He inhaled deeply. The air was no longer bitter. It was cool and bracing. He felt the tension in his muscles turn into hard steel, not constricted fear. Michael turned back to Robert Kaufman, who was smiling triumphantly. This time, he wasn't recording. He was simply looking. "Mr. Kaufman," Michael said, his voice quiet but as sharp as a razor. "You just stole 2 weeks of rest from me. You called the police, using my skin color as your primary argument. You forced me to leave a property that is lawfully mine. I will not go to civil court. I will go to the highest court. And I will make sure all of America knows how you use your privilege to diminish the dignity of others." Robert merely chuckled, adjusting his collar. "Good luck with that, actor. Nicely played." Michael didn't reply. He noted the license plate of Robert's car, confirmed his final video was secure, and with the same quiet dignity with which he arrived, he got into his Porsche. He drove slowly away from the driveway, never looking back. But he didn't head home. He drove a few miles to an overlook where he could see the lights of Malibu and the gleaming, white shell of the Azure Crest Villa. He pulled out his phone, but this time he didn't call Jenna. He called his chief legal counsel, Arthur Kendall. "Arthur, I have a case, and I want to make it a national precedent." It was the first, unwavering step. He was no longer a victim. He was a fighter who had chosen his battlefield. The next morning, the fight for 2 weeks of quiet vacation had officially escalated into a full-blown federal lawsuit. Arthur Kendall, Michael's chief legal counsel, a sharp, seasoned black man in his 60s, sat across from Michael in a sterile, high-rise conference room in Century City. The air conditioning hummed, but the atmosphere was hot, charged. "Robert Kaufman is a connected man, Michael. He's the chairman of a mid-sized private equity firm in Boston, old money with deep ties to Malibu real estate. He didn't just stumble into that house. The rental agency, Luxury Stays, simultaneously accepted both your wire transfer and his certified check, which is a massive liability for them." But Arthur paused, leaning forward, the sharp crease of his suit jacket mirroring his focus. "The key here is the police report. The officer's recommendation for you to leave the premises despite showing valid documentation after Kaufman racially profiled you on the 911 call is a textbook example of systemic bias perpetuating illegal exclusion." Michael stared out the window. The cityscape below looked like a sprawling concrete grid of unseen power lines. Internal monologue, the price of action. "I could have taken the $500,000 settlement Luxury Stays offered last night. I could have flown to Cabo and forgotten the whole thing. But every time I close my eyes, I see that look on Kaufman's face. That dismissive smirk. It wasn't about the money. It was about defining me by the color of my skin, even when I'm standing there, a black man who embodies success. That look is what I'm fighting. The fight is the cost of my dignity." His agent, Jenna, appeared on the conference room screen, her face pinched with stress. "Jenna." "Michael, this is getting messy." TMZ ran a blurb this morning. "Creed star in Malibu squatter spat. They spun it like you were trying to intimidate an elderly couple out of their vacation home." "Michael, elderly? The man's 50, Jenna. And he used the N-word derivative on the 911 call. You just didn't hear it. I have the video." "Jenna." "I know, baby, but perception is our currency. Your endorsements, especially that new athletic line, are getting nervous. They want to know why their leading man is involved in a dispute of ownership rather than training for his next blockbuster." Michael felt a sudden, familiar wave of heat rise in his chest, a mix of anger and frustration. "I'm fighting for something bigger than sneakers, Jenna. I'm fighting for the right to rent a house without being treated like a thief. If they don't get that, then their values don't align with mine." The lawsuit, Jordan versus Kaufman et al., exploded into the news cycle. Michael and Arthur decided their first, most critical move would not be in court, but in the court of public opinion. We need to control the narrative. Arthur instructed. They want to paint you as the aggressive, entitled celebrity. We paint you as the target of institutional racism. We need to frame this not as a rich versus rich spat, but as an experience every person of color deals with, the microaggressions, the presumption of guilt, just on a grander scale. Michael agreed. He chose a platform he knew well, a major late-night talk show. He wouldn't be performing, he would be speaking his truth. 2 days later, he was sitting across from the host, under the blinding white spotlights that always made his sweat glands sting. The air in the studio was frigid, yet he felt a fire in his belly. Michael, let's get straight to the headlines. This Malibu situation, it's everywhere. Can you tell us in your words what happened? Michael, he leaned into the camera. His voice was calm, measured, using the Denzel Washington pause he'd mastered years ago. I arrived at a house I legally rented. The man inside, Mr. Kaufman, refused to leave. That's a civil issue. But he chose to make it a racial one. He looked at me, a black man, and immediately assumed one of two things. I was either a mistake or I was the help. He called the police and used terms like large, black male, and unidentified person threatening my property. He didn't see a contract. He saw a threat. And the most chilling part? The police confirmed I was the lawful renter, yet told me to leave to avoid an escalation. Host, that's profound. So what you're saying is, even with all your success, the fame, the power, you still face this. Michael, he let the silence hang, heavy and acoustic. Fame is a shield, not a suit of armor. It can deflect petty insults. But when the system decides you don't belong in a certain space, a nice house, an executive suite, a safe neighborhood, that shield cracks. And you realize your money doesn't buy your dignity. You have to fight for it. The sensory details of the studio, the low, expected murmur of the audience, the slight scent of hairspray and polished leather, faded as Michael delivered his carefully chosen words. He finished by announcing, "We are proceeding with a lawsuit against both Mr. Kaufman and the rental agency for racial discrimination and failure to enforce a valid contract, using the police report as court evidence. This is for every person who was ever told they were in the wrong place." The clip went viral instantly. The backlash was immediate and two-pronged. Kaufman's supporters called him an opportunistic race baiter. But the surge of support from the community, the memes, the #AzureCrest hashtag, drowned them out. The mounting pressure culminated 2 weeks later during the preliminary motions hearing, held in a stuffy, oak-paneled courtroom. The visual contrast was stark. The cold, institutional brown and beige of the room against the vibrant, tense energy Michael carried. Michael was there primarily to observe, but his presence was a magnet. Robert Kaufman sat rigid at the opposing table, looking older, more strained. His eyes, when they occasionally met Michael's, were no longer smug. They held a simmering resentment, a confusion that his wealth could not resolve this inconvenience. During a recess, as Michael stood near the window, gazing at the distant, hazy Los Angeles hills, Jake, Robert Kaufman's son, approached him tentatively. Jake was dressed in an ill-fitting suit, looking profoundly uncomfortable. Jake, low, almost a whisper. Michael caught the faint smell of mint gum. "Mr. Jordan? I need to say this. My dad is wrong. He's completely wrong. When he called 911, he told my mom to lock the doors. He said it must be some kind of setup from the ghetto." Michael, he turned slowly, meeting Jake's eyes. He felt a moment of deep weariness, but also an odd calmness. This was the small, necessary confession. "Thank you, Jake. But why tell me now here?" Jake, "Because he's losing his mind. He's yelling at my mom, yelling at his lawyers. He truly believes you don't deserve that house. And I looked you up. I watched Fruitvale Station again. You shouldn't have to fight this. Michael, everyone has to fight for their space, Jake. The difference is, my fight is visible. Your father taught you to see color, not context. Your choice now is whether you keep carrying that lesson or you drop it. Jake just nodded, his face etched with distress. He was caught between privilege and morality, and Michael knew that internal battle was almost as fierce as the external one. The psychological tension reached its peak during Arthur Kendall's closing argument on the motion to dismiss. Arthur brought the core of the issue to the foreground. Arthur, Your Honor, the question before us is simple. Does a contract of sale or a rental agreement supersede systemic racial bias? Mr. Jordan, a decorated actor and producer, arrived at his lawful accommodation. Mr. Kaufman, based solely on his prejudice, called the police to report a large, black male. The police, Your Honor, the agents of the state, then used the argument of de-escalation to strip the lawful black renter of his right to occupy the property, while protecting the unlawful white occupant. This isn't about 2 weeks in Malibu. This is about the inherent value of Michael B. Jordan's dignity, which was discounted by a system designed to protect the comfort of people like Mr. Kaufman. As Arthur spoke, Michael observed Robert Kaufman. Robert's right hand was gripping the edge of the table, so tightly his knuckles were bone white. The illusion of control was crumbling. He was no longer smug, he was cornered. Suddenly, Robert stood up, ignoring his lawyer's frantic tug. Robert, his voice was rough, cracking under pressure. It's absurd. The agency made a mistake. He's a celebrity. He'll get his money back 10 times over. Why is he harassing me? I paid my deposit. Why should I be the one to suffer because of this stunt? He pointed a shaking finger directly at Michael. The sudden noise, the eruption of anger, shattered the courtroom's quiet. Michael, sitting upright, felt the raw, ugly prejudice of the moment. He knew he had him. Robert had just confirmed, on record, that the entire situation was about his discomfort and Michael's perceived overreaction. The judge called order. He looked at Michael, then at Kaufman, then back at his notes. The decision was short. The motion to dismiss was denied. The case would proceed to discovery. Leaving the courthouse, Michael felt the weight of the city pressing down. He had won the first round, but the victory was exhausting. He had sacrificed his privacy, his peace, and potentially some commercial deals. The price of victory is visibility. I'm no longer just Michael. I'm the Malibu precedent. But when I stood up, I felt the steel in my spine. That feeling, that quiet knowledge that I refused to shrink, that I refused to be made small, that is what I came for. That's the real creed. He got into his waiting car. The driver closed the door, muffling the shouts of the reporters. The dark tint of the windows was a welcome shield, a temporary boundary against the world's judgment. He looked down at his hands, steady now, no longer trembling. He had faced the demon, not with his fists, but with his truth. He knew the final confrontation would be soon. After the call to his lawyer, Arthur Kendall, Michael B. Jordan no longer felt like a victim. He felt like a strategist. He realized that the fight for 2 weeks' rent was insignificant, but the fight for a legal precedent, utilizing his platform and visibility, was invaluable. Arthur and Michael developed a plan, not just a civil suit for breach of contract, but a federal lawsuit for racial discrimination. The core evidence would be the 911 audio and the police report which recommended that the lawful black renter, Michael, leave the property to de-escalate the situation for the unlawful white occupant. A week later, Michael appeared on a major late-night talk show, speaking directly to millions. The studio was cold, but under the blazing spotlights, he felt a righteous heat. He framed the story not as a celebrity inconvenience, but as the lived experience of an ordinary black man denied a space he had lawfully paid for. My success is not armor. It is just a shield that sometimes cracks, Michael stated, looking directly into the camera. His voice was quiet, but sharp and resolute. Mr. Kaufman didn't see an actor or a valid tenant in me. He only saw a large black male who shouldn't own or use such a home. And the system supported him in that prejudice. This segment, accompanied by video evidence that quickly went viral, caused a social explosion. The hashtag #AzureCrest dominated trends, positioning Michael as the face of the fight against the microaggressions and institutional bias experienced by successful minorities. The case rapidly moved to a decisive hearing. The courtroom was packed. Robert Kaufman was present. His former arrogance had been replaced by a gray, weary expression as his business dealings and reputation began to crumble under public and financial pressure. Arthur Kendall concluded his powerful speech, arguing that Kaufman and the rental agency, Luxury Stays, had perpetuated a social injustice, not just a contractual dispute. Michael then requested permission to address the court personally. This was his crucial, defining moment. He did not speak of the law, he spoke of dignity. Your Honor, I am not demanding millions in compensation. I am demanding the restoration of justice, Michael declared. He took a deep breath, feeling a clean warmth in his chest that replaced the old fear. I was taught to fight, but not with my fists, but with my truth. Mr. Kaufman wanted me to simply leave and find another place, less ambitious. But I will not leave. I stand here for everyone who was once told they were in the wrong neighborhood, the wrong clothes, with the wrong skin color. My right to this villa is a symbol of the right to any space we lawfully occupy. The judge, who had been listening intently, issued the ruling quickly and decisively. Based on clear evidence of racial bias and breach of contract, Michael B. Jordan's lawsuit was granted. Robert Kaufman was ordered to vacate the villa immediately. Luxury Stays was found guilty of criminal negligence and discrimination. It was a victory. Quiet, but profound. Kaufman leaped up to shout, but his lawyer firmly restrained him. Robert only cast a look at Michael filled with pure, powerless hatred. Michael won not only the court case, but also the moral battle. Luxury Stays, desperate to avoid complete bankruptcy and a PR disaster, offered Michael a colossal settlement and, as an additional gesture, transferred the full 1-year rental right for the Azure Crest villa to him. Michael refrained from triumph. He announced that all funds received would be donated to a foundation providing legal aid to victims of housing discrimination. But he never returned to Azure Crest. The house was no longer a symbol of rest for him. It was merely a battlefield. It remained empty. A month later, Michael received an anonymous letter at his office. The letter was typed on plain paper with no signature. It read, "You did more than just win a case, Michael. You opened eyes. What you didn't know. The Azure Crest Villa actually belongs to a mysterious charitable trust that positions itself as a protector of cultural heritage and inclusion. But this trust has been used for years as a tax shelter for the elite, including Kaufman, and its board of directors knowingly rented the property only to white tenants, blocking applications from successful people who did not fit their idea of the upper class. They never expected someone of your status to fight so fiercely. Your victory is not just a victory over Kaufman. Your lawsuit forced federal prosecutors to begin an investigation into the trust itself, which, it turned out, was concealing one of the largest real estate exclusion schemes in the country. They've already started. Thank you. You didn't break a door. You broke an entire wall." Michael felt a shiver run down his body. He looked at the letter, and then at the photograph of the villa on his computer. He hadn't just evicted Kaufman from the house. He had accidentally exposed an entire institutional scheme while defending his dignity. He realized that his true fight was not about entering the house, but about destroying the system that decides who is worthy and who is not. This was the strongest victory he could imagine. He smiled, feeling the clean, strong warmth of dignity filling him. He chose the right battlefield.